since President's Day is coming around the corner, I wanted to make a couple videos until we get to President's Day on the presidents and my views on each president, or some highlights of each president following up to President's Day. So we're going to first start out with the first president of the United States, George, as we Yinzer say, Washington. But as Yins, more suburbanites say, Washington. We say Wash, you say Wash. Tomatoes, tomatoes. Okay, so what? He was born February 22nd, 1732, and died December 14th, 1799. What do I think about George Washington? I like him. I do. But there's some polarization and there's some bad blood when it comes to George Washington. I like the fact that he stood down as the commander-in-chief, or just the commander of the colonial forces of the Continental Army. But I don't like the fact, though, that as president, he allowed Alexander Hamilton to basically control him and to control the federal government in suppressing the whiskey rebels and pushing the whiskey tax of 1791 to 1794. George Washington, as I'm saying it as a suburbanite, he was subdued with federal executive power when he was president of the United States. Yes, he did the great thing of doing a two-term system, establishing that precedent, which I like that we have two terms because it limits the, let's say, long-term tyranny of the executive branch, because, you don't want a president like a king. You want a president that has terms. Get him in real quick, get him out real quick. So the terms are good. We got to have term limits. But George Washington, during his 8-year span as president of the United States, had some faults. Okay? You don't expand the federal powers like he did. I understand as chief executive, he had to establish peace and he would establish tranquility between the Union. I understand that. But when it comes to, let's say, injustice of the whiskey tax, he handled that pretty wrong by letting Alexander Hamilton, like I said, push that ridiculous tax. So we got the second president of the United States, John Adams. John Adams was born on October 30th, 1735, and died July 4th, 1826, ironically, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So, what are my opinions on the second president of the United States? Well, John Adams, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a big fan. I'm a big fan of this guy when it comes to his role in independence. In like, let's say, 1775, 1776 era. John Adams was a great man, but he was a little too radical for my taste. Unlike George Washington, who was a little bit more, let's just say, conservative and laid back, Adams, as vice president, was a little bit more radical when it came to his rhetoric and when it came to his views on the Union. During the Quasi-War between France and the United States, John Adams put a, let's just say, curb on free speech, basically saying that if somebody in the Union speaks out against the federal government, or let's just say says John Adams is weird, they can go to prison. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Because what happened to the First Amendment? And that's what the Anti-Federalists were fighting him against. Led by Thomas Jefferson, the Anti-Federalist, or the Democratic Republican Party, was fighting John Adams, who was a Federalist. He felt that him, as chief executive of the federal government, that he felt that he had expandable powers, that he had a great, let's just say, obligation to subdue tyranny, to subdue treason, per se, on people that spoke out against him. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like that at all. As President of the United States, I think he got an F when it came to his role or his powers as president. But does that neutralize everything he did prior to that or after that? No. I feel like as president, he did a bad job. But as a man all around, he was a really good dude, and he helped this country become independent. I like it. So, my third president, my second cousin 9 times removed on my mother's side, Thomas Jefferson. Also, He is my top 5 favorite president. I'm not going to say which in the top 5, but he is in the top 5. Thomas Jefferson was born on April 13, 1743, and died, ironically, July 4th, 1826. Him and John Adams, who were really good friends off and on throughout their lives, they both died on July 4th, 1826, ironically, which was the 50th anniversary, like I said, of the Declaration of Independence. So, what did Thomas Jefferson do? Well, Thomas Jefferson was an absolute genius. He was just as smart, or even smarter than John Adams. Thomas Jefferson was an absolute force to be reckoned with. I can do a whole video on this dude. But this dude literally was a madman when it came to languages, when it came to books, when it came to theory and philosophy. But as a president, I'd say he did a great job. He was part of the Democratic Republican Party. He was part of expanding states' rights and limiting the size of the federal government, which I love. And this man really set the path to the Virginia dynasty, to the anti-federalist Republican, let's just say, small government, people thrive government. Basically, let's strip the powers of the federal government away and give them to the citizens of the United States. I love it. This man had a great life, and I feel that as a person, he was an absolute genius, like I said before. But he did sort of become hypocritical when it came to his foreign policy of, let's just say, well, we have to limit the size of the federal government, but we have to limit the size of the Navy and the military. Ugh. You know, I understand you don't want a federal military, Thomas Jefferson, but then you want to get entangled with the Barbary pirates in North Africa. You want to send the Navy to fight the Barbary pirates, but then you want to say, I want to shrink the size of the federal government. You can't have both sides. You can't get involved in international waters and international affairs, even though it's affecting your citizens, but then say, I want to limit the power of the federal government. You can't have both. But all in all, Jefferson is my top 5. So, James Madison, the mighty Madison. Jefferson and this guy, well, Jefferson was the mentor and he was like the protege. Okay? James Madison was tiny, smallest president, 5'6", but an absolute force to be reckoned with. He might have been short, but he could punch you in the face when it comes to mental power. This guy was an absolute genius, just like Jefferson. He was born March 16th, 1751, and died June 28th, 1836. So, him, Jefferson, and Washington were nicknamed the Virginia Dynasty. James Madison was the president during the War of 1812, the Second War of Independence between us and Great Britain. And he was put in a rock and a hard place during the War of 1812. Jefferson absolutely cut the Navy and the Army, like I already said before. He cut the power of the federal government, which is good in one way, but bad in another. During wartime against Great Britain, that ain't going to work for James Madison. He had a big mountain to climb, and he climbed it pretty well. The White House got burnt down. The Capitol building got burnt down by the British. D.C. was on fire, and this dude had to build America up from the ashes. But this man fought back. He fought back with tooth and nail and declared that America is an independent country and we weren't going to let Great Britain take this country ever again. This man was a genius. And I don't really have any faults or any negative things to say about James Madison. He was absolutely great. James Monroe. He was born April 28, 1758, and died July 4th, 1831, ironically, 4th of July. This is another American Revolution veteran. James Monroe was, basically, I would say, part of the Virginia dynasty, but he was a student of Jefferson and Madison's teachings and principles. James Monroe was an amazing president. It was really good. Not as great as Jefferson or Washington, but he was just in that category as one of the classical Republicans who kept that Jeffersonian principle of shrinking the size of the federal government not expanding the federal powers too much, but telling foreign nations stay away from this side of the planet, establishing the Monroe Doctrine, which basically essentially told the European powers, listen, no more colonization under Florida of Cuba and Puerto Rico and the islands. This is our side of the planet. We want this part of the planet. We're America. Get out. That's why I think that Monroe is an amazing guy, because he isolated America and basically told the world, we are an independent country now. We're a force to be reckoned with. Stay out. I love it. You got John Quincy Adams, the 6th president of the United States. John Quincy Adams was the son. He was actually the first president to be a child of a former president. He was the son of John Adams, the founding father. John Quincy Adams was born on July 11th, 1767, and died February 23rd, 1848. He was a Yankee president. He was born in Massachusetts, just like his dad. But he had a lot more, I would say, big government principles. He was a Federalist, a Democratic Republican / Federalist. I mean, he played both sides. John Quincy Adams was a typical politician. This guy played both sides, up and down. He was a critic of slavery, but then claimed that he was conservative and a traditionalist. I don't know how you can play both sides and flirt with the Democratic Republicans, then flirt with the Federalists and try to say that you're both sides. I can understand somebody can be different, but in that time period, you can't be pro-slavery, or not to say pro-slavery, anti-slavery, but then pro, let's just say, states' rights in a way, or Democratic Republican. He's an enigma. Okay, and honestly, during his presidency, I don't think he did too well. I think he did a lot of great things throughout his life, and he was a really good lawyer. But I don't think he was one of my top favorite presidents, and I don't really see him as anything ideal when it comes to the executive branch. But then, you got the force to be reckoned with, and this is my final president of the video, of the, let's just say, Revolution era, the Revolution presidents who were born and raised and lived during the American Revolution, essentially. Andrew Jackson, the 7th president, the radical, let's just say, hillbilly president. This president right here was born March 15, 1767, and died June 8, 1845. Jackson was a revolutionist in a way. He was the just black sheep of the presidents at the time. This man changed the status quo. He changed America's perception of the executive branch, of just a politician in general. This guy was dirt poor when he was a kid. Literally, Ulster Scot parents, immigrants from Northern Ireland, complete hillbilly, backwoods of North Carolina, you know what I mean? Like, absolute contradictory of everything that the other presidents were a part of. You know, money, power, education. This guy was like, I'm going to get a dip of tobacco and I'm going to shoot that deer right there. I hate to be stereotypical, but that's just depicting the kind of guy he was. He was a backwoods, just rugged, ridiculous guy. But I love it because he really embodied the spirit of the people. And that's why during his election, the common folk, the peasants of the United States of America, as I put them, they came out in droves and voted for him. The establishment hated it because he changed the whole system and the landscape. He said, I want people to vote. I want the men to vote. I want every man to vote. I want poor dudes to vote. I don't even care, dude. If you're 21 and over, just vote. And so he was a warrior. This guy was an absolute warrior. I would say more than George Washington, because this man fought in the American Revolution, the early Indian Wars, and the War of 1812. This guy absolutely won the Battle of New Orleans. He freaking hated the British, like, to an extent that I don't even know what was going on with this dude. Cut in the face as a kid by a British officer, and then continues the rest of his life to literally just go ape on the British Army. It's absolutely insane. This guy, though, and one negative aspect is when he was president of the United States during the nullification crisis, he claimed that as federal executive, my executive authority as a tyrant, a little bit like Lincoln. But this guy said to South Carolina, you're not going to leave the Union. You're not going to leave my executive power. I'm president. I tell you what to do. And John C. Calhoun, his vice president, was like, y'all don't tell my state, you don't tell my people what to do. Jackson, you son of a beep. It went on. Him and the vice president of the United States were fighting. These guys literally had the same morals and values and principles. But when it came to states' rights and federal power, that's where they completely differed. Calhoun wanted states' rights, independent Confederate government, independent Southern blood. But this guy was all about, we must establish executive power. We must be the strong force of the Union. No state trumps me. Well, that is a negative side towards Andrew Jackson that I don't like. And also another thing I don't like about him is what he did to the Cherokee Indians. What he did to the Cherokee people was absolutely disgusting and barbaric. And that is one huge stain on his legacy that I just, ugh, you know what I mean? Like, you can't do that to Indians. Like, you can't do that to those people. Those people suffered so much over the past 400 or 500 years. And that's one thing I don't like about Jackson. But that is the Revolution President. That's part 1 of my President series to President's Day. Peace out.